think we're good, Matt. Mr. Koenig, I'm going to show you what's been marked as defense exhibit number DD, and ask you if you recognize that particular exhibit.
Yes, sir.
And did you view that exhibit and did you sign it and date it?
I did.
Okay, and did you view that exhibit in an effort to determine whether that exhibit had a fair and accurate representation of the contents of Q6?
Yes.
Okay. Now we remove exhibit DD into evidence.
All right, it'll be admitted as number 6, defense 6.
Go on, you see. Now, Mr. Koenig, this exhibit is broken down into folders, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what they're about to see. Are these PNGs?
These are going to be still images from the video.
And those still images were extracted from that Q6,
Correct.
and they were placed in a folder.
Yes.
And that folder was called,
Well, I think you're having various folders here, like 13/26/25 to 13/26/26.
gotcha. But these are PNGs, am I
They're
correct?
still images of the video you've already seen. These are just the still images of it.
Okay. Matt, can we please go to folder number 1? So stay right there, Matt, just for a second. For these two areas of interest for the defense that we wanted you to capture in a still image in this particular exhibit.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Matt, you can run through them. Now, each of those movements is Mr. Thunderberg actually moving the cursor to go to each image, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Matt, can you go backwards? Next folder, Matt. Matt, let me know and I'll do it for you. Okay, Matt, go through the individual frames. Same in this folder, and Matt, you can stop it. Same in this folder, you have individual frames that we're viewing in this folder from the Q6 to the areas that we had requested. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Next one, Matt.
Okay. Do you want to whiteboard?
Right. Now, this particular set of images have been magnified and enhanced, is that correct?
Correct. And looped.
And looped, okay. Go ahead, Matt. Stop right there, Matt. These particular images, you're able to tell by the time stamp that we have what image goes in sequence, is that correct?
Correct. This particular video actually has embedded in the data out to that number. It's a number we may not manufacture. That's actually in the data itself. So we know exactly that if it's 30 frames per second, it means each frame is about 1/30 of a second, or what we call 33 milliseconds apart.
So if you're looking at this number right here, as they go up and down, you'll be able to know the order of when that particular event happened.
That's correct.
Hey, Matt? Oh. Go ahead, Matt. Okay. In the last folder, Matt, in that exhibit. Now let's go to the beginning of that again, and then stop it at the very beginning. Okay. Mr. Koenig, this number right here, as it gets higher, this is the first event in the image, is that correct?
So then shoot designated.
Yes, that I designated. And then as it goes higher, it's later frames from that frame, is that correct?
Yes, it's in time serial. This is what the video you want already. It's just, these are the individual images that make up the video itself.
Matt, go ahead. Okay, Matt. Mr. Koenig, I'm going to show you what's been marked. But before we get to that, just a second. Matt, let me have DD1. Might as well do it right when we're at it. May I approach you? Mr. Koenig, I'm going to show you what's been marked composite exhibit DD1 coming from exhibit DD. Did you take a look at those composite and compare those composite exhibits to the exhibit DD to make sure that those fairly and accurately depict what was contained in that DD exhibit?
For these three frames,
Yes, for those three frames.
portions of those three frames, I should say.
Yes.
Yes, sir, it does.
Okay, Your Honor, we would, at this point in time, introduce DD1 as a composite exhibit, and we would ask for permission to publish it to the jury.
Any objection to the admission of number 7?
No, Your Honor.
All right, it will be admitted against number 7.
front.
Either one. And approach your one. Mr. Koenig, I'm going to show you now what's been marked as Exhibit JJ, and ask you to take a look at Exhibit JJ and see if you recognize Exhibit JJ.
Yes, sir, I recognize.
And did you review the contents of that particular exhibit and compare it to what was contained in the Q6 hard drive that you received? That was the hard drive imaged from the copier.
I did.
And in fact, does it fairly and accurately depict those images that are contained in the Q6 hard drive?
Yes, sir, and I have initial images.
Thank you. May I approach? Your Honor, we would be admitting Exhibit JJ.
JJ, we admitted it's number 8.
You may publish it.
You may.
Now, Mr. Koenig, likewise, these are individual files, is that correct?
Correct, again, still images of videos, frames, which we call them.
And these were areas that we had asked for you to do that in order to be able to focus on that particular area.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
I'll give it back. Okay, Matt, go ahead. One more time, Matt. And again, Mr. Koenig, as these numbers get higher, those are the later frames.
That's correct.
They start from the lower number and progress to a higher number on the milliseconds. Is that correct?
1/30th of a second apart.
Next one, Matt. You want me to turn it off?
No.
Okay. Now, this is a different segment of the video, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Matt. Stop there, Matt. We want you to focus on this particular area in these particular images, correct?
Correct.
And so each, again, the lower images to the higher images show the progression. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do it again, Matt, please. Stop there for a second, Matt. Now, Mr. Koenig, you realize that the cameras were up 30, 35 feet into the theater, is that correct?
Correct, up on the wall. Yes.
You went to that theater, is that correct?
Yes.
And are you going to have a different perspective with the camera 35 feet up than someone that's seated in, for example, this seat 9, where Mr. Reeves was seated?
Yes, but definitely it's a different perspective. If you're looking at me here, and there's a camera over there looking at you, it'll show the same actions, but from completely different direction.
Go ahead, Matt.
virtual witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Mr. Koenig, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Defense Exhibit JJ1, which is a composite exhibit, and ask you if you reviewed those particular photos, images, to determine whether they fairly and accurately depict what was in Exhibit JJ, but just now in a hard form.
Yes, Sidney.
We would move to admit JJ1 in defense exhibit.
All right, that'll be admitted as number 9.
Your Honor, may I have the publishing jury?
You may.
Can I approach you?
You may.
Mr. Koenig, I'm going to show you what has been marked as defense exhibit KK, and ask you to please take a look at that exhibit.
Yes.
Did you review that exhibit?
Yes.
Did you view it?
Yeah, I did.
And did you compare that exhibit with the contents of that exhibit with Q6, which was the hard drive image, hard drive from the cop theater?
Yes, and this is from camera 12, which is on the left wall.
And does that fairly and accurately depict what the contents of Q6 were or are?
Yes, and I've initialed it and dated it.
Your Honor, we would, at this point in time, move to admit as defense exhibit KK.
That'll be admitted as number 10. You may.
So this is, Mr. Koenig, the camera from the left side. If you're looking at the theater screen, it's the camera from the left side of that theater. Is that correct?
Sitting here, it would be over here.
Yeah. Go ahead, Matt. Right there, stop, Matt. Mr. Koenig, did we ask you to pull those particular images so that we could focus on a particular area of that video?
That's correct.
And is that the area that we wanted you to pull images from to focus?
Yes, sir, it is.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the use of the video. It's cumulative evidence. We don't admit the photographs. We have no objection to the admission of the photographs, but presenting the video over and over is cumulative at this point.
You want to argue about it? go through the images. Your Honor, may I approach?
Amen.
Mr. Koenig, I'm going to show you what's been marked for defense as Exhibit P1. I'm going to ask you to take a look at that exhibit and tell me if you reviewed that exhibit and compared it to the images that were in Exhibit P, Defense Exhibit P,
Yes.
and do they fairly and accurately depict the actual images that were located in Exhibit P?
Correct.
And did those images likewise fairly and accurately depict what was in hard drive Q6?
Q6, yes.
Your Honor, we would move to admit P1,
Can be admitted as number 11.
and we would ask that it be published.
Go ahead, second.
Let's move this back one. Do you move this
I
way?
don't know, I'll see.
Let's move this. Yes. And flip. Is that okay?
To the court.
Please. Mr. Koenig, just a few more questions. You remember the red square that we had in some of these particular videos and images, correct?
Yes, sir.
And did we ask you to put that red square around a an area of that image or of that video that was either a reflective or emitting light.
Correct.
Okay. Do you remember going with our crime scene expert to the Cobb Theater after this incident in an effort to try to find the source of that particular emitting or reflective light?
That was the object of the visit, or part of the object of the visit.
And there was a question as to whether that emitting or reflective light was either coming from a shoe or from a cell phone.
Yeah, you advised us that it could be one of those two.
Okay. And so we asked you to go to that theater with an individual by the name of Doug Lacey. Is that correct?
Yes, my associate, yes.
Okay. And you were there present as well?
I was.
I was in the wee hours of the morning, middle of the night?
The theater wouldn't shut down. I think we had to go when there was no movies being shown.
Okay. And did you try on that particular day, your team try to see if that was even going to be possible, meaning to determine the source of that particular light?
Yeah, but we did realize that the video system had been completely changed, and they weren't even sure that the cameras hadn't been changed. We realized we couldn't do anything in the way of trying to identify where that light source would be or what it was.
One last housekeeping matter. We talked early on in your testimony in this case about the Aaron Hernandez case.
Correct.
Did you serve as an expert for the defense or the prosecution in that case?
Yeah, I made a mistake when I said it was for the government. We actually did the case for the defense.
Your Honor, we have no further questions of this witness. We will pass the witness.
All right, thank you. Be a good time for a break, ladies and gentlemen. Let's take 10 minutes. Remember my instructions during the recess and go back to the jury pool before we let him go. Okay, hold on a minute. The state has indicated they're not going to cross Mr. Koenig, so may this witness be released?
He's under subpoena, but yes, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Koenig, you're free to go, and just if you get called back, you'll have to come.
I appreciate that, Your Honor.
Thank you. And you, ladies and gentlemen, may take the 10-minute recess.
All rise for the recess for 10 minutes. Okay, everyone, be seated.
All right, we ready to begin? Bring them in.
Jurors in the courtroom, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Jurors may be seated. All jurors are present and accounted for, Your Honor.
Thank you, Deputy. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Were you all able to abide by my instructions during the recess? All right, then let's get started. Mr. Escobar?
Your Honor, the defense would call Joanna Turner.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you shall give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I'm sorry?
Just speak into the mic. You don't have to speak right into it.
Go ahead, Mr. Escobar.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Turner.
Good morning.
Ms. Turner, are you employed?
No, I'm not.
You retired?
I'm retired.
And do you remember when you retired? 2005 sounds accurate?
2004 or 5.
Okay. And would you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what type of business you retired from?
Airline industry.
Okay, what were you doing at the airline industry?
I was working in the call center.
The call center.
Mhm.
And I believe, tell me if you agree or disagree, you were in the banking industry before that.
Yes, I was.
You were a bank manager, is that correct?
Yes, I was.
Okay, and how long did you do that?
4 or 5 years.
Okay. Now, I'm going to direct your attention to January the 13th of 2014. Can you tell us whether you went to the Cobb Theater that particular day?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and who did you go with to the Cobb Theater that day?
My husband.
Okay, are you still married?
No, I'm not.
Was your husband back then Mark Turner?
Yes.
Okay. You would agree or disagree that when you arrived at the Cobb Theater, the previews were already playing?
Yes.
You would agree with that?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, and so would you agree or disagree that when you went into the Cobb Theater, you sat in the very top row, correct?
Mm-hmm, correct.
In the very last 2 seats of that top row.
Yes.
Is that correct? So if you're looking at the screen here, it would have been that very top row, very right, last 2 seats.
Correct.
And can you tell me who was seated in the last seat and who was seated in the seat just before that? The last seat right next to the aisle. Who was seated there?
My husband.
Your husband.
Yeah.
And you were seated
Next to him.
to the left.
To the left.
Okay. Was there a reason that you all sat there on that aisle?
Yes, we always sit on the aisle.
Okay, is there a reason for
Because he's
that?
got a back problem, so sometimes he need to stand up and stretch.
Okay. When you went and sat down and started to watch the previews, what were the lighting conditions at the time in that theater?
It was dim, but you can still see a little bit.
Okay. And what was the noise level? Were the previews playing?
It was loud.
Previews were loud? Okay. And I'm going to try to take you through, the process of what took place. You're seated there. Did there come a time where you saw a gentleman that was coming into your row, meaning coming from the lobby area or the downstairs, coming up the stairs, and coming into your row A?
Yes.
Okay. And was that gentleman Curtis Reeves?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And so when he came into your row, was he careful in getting through?
No, I think he was because it's so small, such a small space.
Okay.
So
And did you see him actually go to his seat?
No,
You were paying attention to what?
to the preview.
To the previews. Now, did you see anyone standing up after Mr. Reeves had passed you to go to his seat?
No, I did not.
Didn't see anybody standing up. You were watching the previews. Is that correct?
Correct.
Objection leading.
Sorry, Your Honor.
Sister.
Do you agree or disagree that at some point in time you saw someone standing up that was in the row in front of your row?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And can you describe that individual for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
Tall, slim.
And when you saw him standing up, would you agree or disagree that he was talking but you could not hear what he was saying?
Correct.
And while he was talking, would you agree or disagree that he was facing the back row?
Yes.
And he would have been facing, you agree or disagree, in the area of Mr. Reeves?
I'm sorry, repeat that again?
You would agree that he was facing the back row where Mr. Reeves was?
In that area, yeah.
Now, would you agree or disagree that while this was taking place, you were both glancing over there and then also looking at your previews?
Agree.
You were interested in those previews?
Yes.
Those previews were, well, let me ask you this question. Do you agree or disagree that some of those previews were action-packed previews?
I couldn't say. I don't recall.
You don't recall the actual previews that were on?
No.
Okay. Now, would you agree or disagree that as this tall gentleman was standing facing in the direction of Mr. Reeves, that you saw an actual throwing motion of a mug or a thermos?
Objection leading.
Agree or disagree?
Overruled.
Would you agree or disagree that you saw this tall gentleman with either a cup or a mug or a thermos in his hand, dark in color, making a throwing motion towards that back row with his left hand?
Objection, this is a leading question.
No, it's not. Overruled.
Would you agree with that?
Yes, I did. I agree.
You agree? Okay. Now, would you agree or disagree that after you saw that throwing motion, your eyes went back to the previews, to watch the previews? Agree or disagree?
Agree.
Would you agree or disagree that that throwing motion that you told the juries about was a quick throwing motion? Quick.
Yes, it is.
Now, would you agree that, or disagree, that about anywhere between 4 to 6 seconds passes?
Yes, about.
And would you agree or disagree that now you hear a loud voice, correct?
Correct.
And that loud voice was coming from that tall...
Objection leading.
Would you-
Sustained.
Would you agree or disagree that that loud voice was coming from that tall gentleman that you just described with this throwing motion?
Agree.
And would you agree or disagree that that gentleman was still standing at the time?
Agree.
Do you remember what that tall gentleman was saying, Mrs. Turner?
I'm texting my daughter, if you don't mind, in that sense.
That's what you remember.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree or disagree that at that moment you looked over towards Mr. Reeves, correct?
At which moment?
After that statement was made.
No, I was looking at Mr. Oulson.
Mr. Oulson, at some point in time, did you direct your attention back to Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
And do you agree or disagree that what caused you to direct your attention to Mr. Reeves is that you noticed that Mr. Reeves was sitting kind of funny?
Correct.
Would you agree or disagree that what you described as something funny was that Mr. Reeves was leaning towards his left
Agree.
in his chair?
Agree.
Would you agree or disagree that throughout this period of time right now, you didn't hear a peep from Mr. Reeves, right?
Agree.
Would you agree or disagree that it was at this moment, after seeing Mr. Reeves kind of sitting funny, that you noticed a ring of fire and some popcorn?
Popcorn first, and then I hear a gunshot and the ring of fire.
Would you agree or disagree that you did not see any weapon?
No, I did not.
But you would agree that after the ring of fire, would you agree or disagree, that after the ring of fire, you actually saw Mr. Reeves laying a pistol on his left knee?
I believe it's the right knee.
You thought it was the right knee? One of the knees. Is that correct?
Agree.
And would you agree or disagree that immediately after that happened, that you noticed Mr. Reeves's hands going to his head?
Yes.
You agree or disagree that at that point in time you get up out of your chair?
No.
What do?
I waited until this gentleman come up to Mr. Reeves. There's a suggester of showing a badge and hold out his left hand for his gun. And once I saw Mr. Reeves give this gentleman the gun, that's when I feel safe to stand up.
Okay, and you did. Is that correct?
Yeah, right after that, probably.
Okay. And would you agree or disagree that at that point in time you got up and then shortly thereafter you went down the stairs?
Yes,
Is that correct?
correct.
And would you agree or disagree that at some point shortly thereafter a woman who had been injured approached you
Agree.
and that you assisted her with whatever you had in your hand to control the bleeding?
Agree.
And would you agree or disagree that you then went to that back exit door to assist law enforcement to be able to come in through that back door.
Agree.
Now, would you agree or disagree that at some point thereafter, you joined a group of individuals that were congregating in the theater?
Yes, agree.
And would you agree or disagree that those individuals were in fact talking?
Yes,
group.
Agree.
And would you agree or disagree that no police officer ever came up to you and told you you're not supposed to talk about what happened amongst yourself? That never happened.
Agree.
And would you agree likewise that you didn't witness any police officer talking to the group, telling
Objection,
them?
leading.
Sustained.
Would you agree or disagree that at no point in time did you see a police officer approaching the group you were in to say, don't talk about anything that was
I did not.
witnessed here? Now, how long were you down there in that group before you were relocated?
I would say about 10, 15 minutes.
Okay, and was your husband likewise in that group? Mark Turner?
I believe so.
Okay, and is it, would you agree or disagree that Mr. Turner was likewise speaking to individuals within that group?
Agree.
Would you agree or disagree that while you were there in that group, that a voluntary statement was filled out by you?
Agree.
And would you agree or disagree that your husband likewise within that group filled out his voluntary statement?
Agree.
And would you agree or disagree that you told your husband what you had witnessed there in that particular theater, there while you all were in that group?
Disagree.
Where did you tell him your version of what had happened?
I believe after we got moved to the theater across, and we were sitting there waiting for the detective to talk to us, I believe at that time I told him what I saw.
And you told him what you've told the ladies and gentlemen of the jury here today?
Yes.
So you went from the theater in that group to what area of the complex?
I think it's a theater adjacent to that theater.
Okay. And when you went into that adjacent theater, was there a group of individuals, lay people, patrons of the theater that were in that theater as well?
Yes.
And when you went into that second theater, were those individuals likewise talking amongst themselves?
Agree.
And would you agree or disagree that your husband was within that group of patrons in the other theater?
Disagree.
Where was your husband?
He was sitting by me.
But there, where I'm saying in that theater.
In that theater, we were sitting by ourselves.
Okay. How many people would you say were in that second theater?
20, 25?
20, 25. In that second theater, did you hear any police officer indicate to you and your husband not to discuss your testimony amongst each other?
I did not.
In that theater, did you hear any police officer tell any of the patrons that were there in that theater not to discuss their testimony amongst each other?
No, I did not.
You would agree or disagree that the interview that you had with law enforcement. That was in a cleaning room, right?
I believe so.
And would you agree or disagree that that interview lasted about 10 minutes?
Yes.
I have no further questions.
Ross?
Good morning, Mr. Stern.
Good morning.
You indicated that when you entered into the theater, the lights were a little bit dim,
Yes.
and even though it was dim, you could see about 5 seats away. Is that fair?
Correct.
All right, and in fact, you could see, based on the lighting conditions in the theater, up to 10 seats away. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
So although we're saying that it's dim, focusing on just the word dim, you could see 10 seats from you, correct?
Correct.
So it was light enough in the theater for you to see.
Yes.
And even though we have heard that the previews were playing, you could still hear, correct?
If I wanted to, yes.
Okay. In other words, you didn't have any difficulty hearing your husband, Mark, who was next to you, right?
No.
And you felt, even though the previews were playing, that you could hear people 5 and 10 seats away if you chose to listen to their conversation. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes.
So the reason you couldn't hear specific words or specific conversations was because you weren't listening for specific words or specific conversations. Is that correct?
Correct.
But you did hear the chattering in the theater, and you could hear that chattering up to 10 seats away. Is that correct?
Correct.
So it obviously wasn't deafeningly loud in the theater.
It's loud.
Okay, but you could still hear people talking 10 seats away.
Yes.
Would you agree with me that Mr. Reeves, when you saw him, he appeared to be a large man?
Yes.
You indicated that the first time you saw the defendant was when he was coming up the aisle and then walked across your row in order to get to his seat, correct?
Correct.
And based on your life experiences, the way you observed the defendant, you felt that he was rude. Isn't that correct?
At the time, yes.
And when he went through the row, he was trying to avoid people's feet, correct?
I'm sorry, repeat that again?
Was he trying to avoid stepping on people's feet when he went through the row?
My feet, yes.
Okay. But based on your observation of him, he appeared to be rude.
Well, he just didn't say, excuse me, just standing there on my ride. So I just moved my feet back, so he's gently passed.
Okay, but what I'm asking you is based on everything you observed about the defendant.
She's answered that.
Sustained. Sustained.
I didn't hear the, yeah. I didn't hear your ruling.
Sustained.
All right, so you indicated that you saw the person that was shot standing up, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and did you learn his name?
Not after, not at the time, but after, yes.
Okay, and his name is Chad Oulson?
Correct.
All right. So you indicated that you saw Chad Oulson standing up, is that correct?
Correct.
And at that time, when you first saw him standing up, you thought that Chad Oulson and the defendant here were friends.
Correct.
And that's because the conversation that you were personally witnessing wasn't anything of a violent nature, so to speak.
No, he's not.
Okay, and that was the reason, based on what you were observing, that they were just having a conversation.
Correct.
It didn't concern you at that point.
It did not.
And at that time, Chad Oulson was only standing in place, correct?
Correct.
I'm going to take this in some segments. So the first time you see Chad Oulson standing, there was nothing that gave you any concern in the theater, correct?
Correct.
So at this point, when you see Chad Oulson, he was not reaching over to attack or punch or do anything to the defendant, correct?
Correct.
Wasn't making any threatening statements to the defendant, correct?
Correct.
And that's the reason why you went back to watch the previews, correct?
Correct.
Now, you indicated that at some point in time, you saw what you believe to be an object, right?
Correct.
And you said that this object appeared to you to be a thermos, correct?
Correct.
So when you say thermos, you're talking about something that you would drink out of, correct?
Correct.
Now, you'd agree with me that a thermos or something that looks like an object you would drink out of does not look like a cell phone, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, you could definitively state, meaning you could state with certainty that it was not a cell phone, correct?
Correct.
Now, you indicated that you thought you saw a throwing motion, correct?
Correct.
You did not see any objects thrown, though, correct?
Correct.
And the object that you were talking about seeing was this thermos, this drinking object, correct?
Correct.
At the time that you saw this throwing motion of this thermos, did you hear the defendant say anything to the effect of, ow, I was hit, anything at all like that?
I did not.
In fact, you didn't hear the defendant say anything at all, correct?
Correct.
Since you were looking in that direction, you didn't see the defendant react as if he had been hit by an object, correct?
Correct.
For example, let's say an object was thrown and it hit somebody. Generally, people grab that area of their body that they're hit.
Objectives to generally people, that's totally speculative.
It's common sense.
Overruled.
If people are hit by an object, they would grab the part of their body that they were hit, correct?
Correct.
You did not see that happen, did you?
I did not.
And at that time, when you're talking about this throwing motion of a thermos, you did not see Chad Oulson jumping or going into your aisle, correct?
Correct.
You didn't see Chad Oulson virtually on top of this defendant, did you?
No, I did not.
Did you hear the defendant yelling, no, no, no?
No, I did not.
Did you hear him yelling, whoa, whoa, whoa?
No, I did not.
Did you see the defendant holding his left arm out to prevent an incredible attack that was coming?
No, I did not.
Now, although you indicated that Chad Oulson said something, you indicated that he was not yelling loud. Isn't that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay. So although he was loud, you would say that he was firm.
Correct.
So he wasn't yelling and screaming, he was just firm in telling the defendant that he was texting his daughter.
Correct.
And you think that he even said, do you mind? Or some words to that effect.
Correct.
So at this point, Chad Oulson's just standing, facing the defendant, correct?
Correct.
And in a firm voice, not yelling or threatening, said that he was texting his daughter.
Correct.
And it's during this time that you say that you see the defendant leaning backwards or leaning to the left.
Leaning to the left.
Okay. Now, you don't know if he was reaching for a firearm at that point, do you?
No idea.
Because if he was leaning to the left at that point, the only thing that was happening was Chad Oulson was in front of him, just telling him, I'm texting my daughter, correct?
Correct.
You didn't see anything that was life-threatening at that point, correct?
Correct.
And And at this point, when you said that you saw the defendant doing something, Mr. Oulson wasn't jumping into your row, correct?
Correct.
And at that point, you didn't hear the defendant yelling, no, 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 or whoa, whoa, whoa.
Correct.
In fact, you never heard the defendant yelling, no, 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 or whoa, whoa, whoa.
Correct.
And you never saw the defendant reaching his left hand out as Chad Oulson was virtually on top of him, correct?
Correct.
Now, isn't it true that at no time, let me ask you it this way, was there a female you indicated, was it Nicole Oulson, who you met with later on, who had her finger that was shot off?
Yes.
Okay. At no time did you see her fighting with Chad, correct?
No, I didn't see her at all.
Okay. So when you never saw her ever? Up until the point in time that you helped her with her hand?
Correct.
Okay. So by that answer, you're saying that you never saw her holding Chad Oulson back?
No, I did not.
You never saw her having this struggle with Chad where he was trying to get into your row, correct?
Correct.
You never saw Chad Oulson punch the defendant, correct?
Correct.
At no time did you ever hear the defendant here, and I know we were talking about with the throwing of the throwing motion. I'm talking about at no time. At no time did you ever hear the defendant say anything that led you to believe that he was hit.
Correct.
At no time did you ever see him lean over as if he was struck by holding a part of his body.
Correct.
The only time that you saw him holding his head or rubbing his head was after he fired the shot.
Yes.
Let's talk about this possible throwing motion. Isn't it true that you're not even sure that you saw that?
I'm pretty sure I saw it.
Okay. Would it refresh your memory if I showed you a copy of your deposition?
Sure.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
And for counsel, I'm looking at page 73, 74, 77, and 82. First, I'm looking at page 77. Can you read lines 17 through 20 to yourself?
To myself?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. After reviewing your deposition, isn't it true that you indicated that you weren't 100% sure?
At the time, I was telling Mr.
Well-
Escobar, right? This is
Yes. I mean, what I'm asking you is, in the deposition, did you indicate to Mr. Escobar that you were not 100% sure?
yes.
Okay. Page 82.
Judge, I'm going to ask him, the document of completeness, that he read all those lines that she read, because I believe it puts it in context.
If that's the case, then
I'll continue down to 24.
Please, I think you started at 73, did you not?
I was at 77.
Well, You started to tell me it was 73, and there is conversation in 73 concerning the black.
Right, that was, we have to approach.
Yeah. Overruled.
Okay, so going back to the question, you indicated that you were not 100% sure, correct?
I'm not 100%.
Okay. Page 82, lines 22 on page 81 through line 4 on page 82. So this part right here, just read that to yourself.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, upon reading that, does that refresh your memory that you indicated, I think I saw a cup in his hand, that little throwing motion?
Yes.
So you'd agree with me, you said you think?
Mhm.
You gotta answer out loud, sorry.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. And would you agree with me, the way you were testifying, you said the word throwing motion, but isn't it true that you actually saw something that moved real quick and not a throwing motion?
Can you rephrase that question?
Yes. The motion that you saw, was it just a real quick movement towards the defendant, not a throw?
Yeah, it's just a quick motion,
Okay, so it was not a throw.
not a throw.
And again, during this time that we're talking about, this quick movement that was not a throw, you didn't think anything was happening that you had to pay attention to, correct?
Correct,
And that's why you went back to watch the theater previews.
correct.
And that quick motion you're talking about, you didn't even think that was in a threatening manner because you still thought they were just friends.
Correct.